Nice enough to join us with more on the Niners from the outstanding Locked On 49ers Daily Podcast, former NFL defensive back Eric Crocker. Eric, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, didn't Sam Darnold look pretty good yesterday?
Hey, look, man, when he had the other starters with him, obviously excluding George Kittle, didn't have Christian McCaffrey, but when he had Debo, when he had Ayuk out there and Trent Williams, all we saw was touchdowns go on the board. So, I agree,
Eric, you
man.
going to entertain that, man?
It's true.
Don't entertain it.
So right now, Brock Purdy, he's doing a great job, but he got the allegations on him that, hey, man, anybody can play in the system, and people wanted to see, well, what would Brock look like? And when he had the guys out, Sam Darnold, but when he had the guys out there, he scored 2 touchdowns. So that's all I know. 2 touchdowns, 2 drives with the guys, and it was fun to see. It was cool to see.
Yeah. Although in all honesty, of course, and you know this a lot better than I do. I mean, the Rams pretty much just sat there in that 4-3, right? He didn't see a lot of exotic coverages, did Sam Darnold yesterday?
Well, they might be anticipating seeing the 49ers in the divisional round. So, you're like, all right, let's not show them too much. Let's not tip our hand. They already know us very well. But if you have some kind of game plan that you might, think you have to do in the postseason, let's hold off on that. Let's be real vanilla. Let's get Puka Nacua his record and then get out of here. And somehow they escape with a win with turning Carson Wentz into Cam Newton.
Joined by Eric Crocker, host of Locked On Podcast with 49ers. Eric, let's start right there real fast. I, as a 49er fan, did not want to see the Rams win. And the reason why is, I'm saying it right here, right now. I think the Rams, of all the teams in the NFC, scare me the most because they're familiar with the 49ers, and I wanted them to play the Cowboys to have a more difficult path to play the 49ers. Tell me why I should be wrong and not be worried about the Rams.
Well, I think you're right, but I think for me it's more so about who's that quarterback for them. And anytime you play a quarterback that is a veteran, he understands how to win. He understands how to play winning football. We watched him win the Super Bowl, a couple years ago, and starting to get healthy. Early in the year, they played a lot of games without guys like Kyron Williams, who ran for over 1,000 yards. They played a lot of games without guys like Cooper Kupp. Now all of a sudden you have those guys and they're healthy with Matthew Stafford, and then obviously the offense being able to help a guy like Aaron Donald a little bit more. I think for them, that's a recipe for success. And then I also think about just who's coaching them. Like, Sean McVay has been a really good coach in the NFL. And I think because of the start to the season, people kind of counted them out. But now they stormed back. They're getting healthy. I think they are a very dangerous team. And I feel the posters out on social media. A lot of 49 fans are like, oh, here come the Rams. And people want to downplay it. But they are a scary team. Maybe one of the scarier teams outside of 49ers entering the postseason.
Catching up with Eric Crocker, former defensive back, host of the Locked On 49ers podcast. Other than injury, which I know is always at the top of the list for the 49ers and pretty much every team, but other than injury, what do you think the 49ers' biggest concerns are right now? And do we have to put Money Moody on that list after the day he had yesterday?
We'll see with Money Moody, and we might have to remove the money part in his nickname and just call him Moody by his last name. He has to show you that, hey, man, it can't come down to him making or missing a kick for you to win or lose a game. And unfortunately, especially in the postseason, games get really tight, and it might come down to that. So we probably don't have the same type of confidence in him that we had in Robbie Gould when he stepped on the field, missing 0 field goal attempts in the postseason. But I'd say outside of Money Moody, who hopefully it doesn't come down to him having to kick a field goal and win the game or not lose the game, I think it's the turnovers. But when you look at the 49ers and the games that they've lost, that's really what it comes down to. I'd say most coaches will tell you got to win the turnover battle and you got to win, 2 out of 3 phases of the game. But for the 49ers, that has really been their Achilles heel. In games where they've lost, they've just turned the ball over, especially late in games. I know the Ravens game, they started out turning the ball over, but it's just turning the ball over at an alarming rate. And that's the only way I feel like they'll lose the game. So if they can take care of the turnovers and not, get tight in those type of situations and play well, I think they're fine. They're going to be extremely difficult to beat. But unfortunately, in games that have been a little tighter, the Cleveland Browns game, they turned the ball over a little too much. The Minnesota Vikings game, 2 interceptions on the last 2 drives. the Cincinnati Bengals game, 3 turnovers in the second half. You know, that's extremely difficult. So obviously take care of the ball, but the penalties, I mean, not, excuse me, the turnovers, that would be the only way I see somebody beating the 49ers.
Eric, we saw Clelin Ferrell leave the game yesterday on the cart, and it sounds like, from everything we've heard, that he did not tear anything, and it may be one of those things where he's off a week or two. Do you think there's any opportunity we see him in the 2 weeks from now?
You know, I think with the 49ers, they have a solid amount of depth on the defensive line. So I don't think they have to rush anybody back, especially Clelin Ferrell. He's a guy that does multiple things for them because he can rush outside. They can do some things where they slide him inside as well. But, you know, you do have other edge rushers, obviously trading for Chase Young, getting him in the middle of the year. You know, you have Randy Gregory, you traded for him. And I know Randy Gregory and maybe even Chase Young maybe haven't had the impact on the field in the sense of sacks. But when you talk about just having a rotation of guys to keep guys fresh and keep them coming on the field, I think you have to like where you're at, and maybe they can hold off until a guy like Ferrell, who is more depth on that defensive line, gets healthy.
Eric Crocker with us from the Locked On 49ers pod. Eric, what in the world happened to the Philadelphia Eagles?
You know, I think that's the big question everybody's wondering. But, you know, you kind of looked into last year, and I remember I was listening to Colin Cowherd, and he started talking about like all those close wins they had. And last year, you looked at the Minnesota Vikings that way. What happened to them? They got bounced out the playoffs right away. Well, this year, the Philadelphia Eagles, they were able to win all those close games. And I think because of last year, we were like, man, they're starting off their 10-1. Man, this is a super battle-tested team. But the moment they got that haymaker from the 49ers, it's almost like they just weren't able to recover. They lost the next 2 games after losing to the 49ers, and they just kind of lost their mojo. You see how they're talking to the media. It's almost like they're trying to convince themselves that they're the same team, but clearly they're not, and they're not able to figure it out. And now you got a banged up A.J. Brown. We'll see if he comes back for the wild card round game. But they play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I don't think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are just this hot team that, you know, you just won't lose or can't lose. But I will say, right now, there's no game that's a given for the Philadelphia Eagles. They got to go on the road. They just haven't played well. Their quarterback is kind of being hampered a little bit by a knee injury. What is he going to look like? He didn't play well yesterday. Just their run game has been super inconsistent after a hot start early to this year with Swift. They started to try to get Gainwell going, but it's been all over the place, no consistency anywhere, and their defense has been really bad over the last 2 months. So really tough going for the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't feel bad for them at all. I hope they keep losing.
That's right. I love where you're coming with it. Eric, you're a former DB yourself, and as playing that position, we look at the 49ers, and they've kind of been banged up in the last couple of weeks, especially with Jair Brown sitting and seeing Logan Ryan jump in there. Do you expect those guys to be at their peak here coming up in a couple of weeks, and you see Ambry on the outside with Jair Brown? Is that what we're looking at?
You know, I hope so, man. First, I want to start by giving Diamador Lenore his flowers because, you know, a guy who he came into this season is like, okay, he's going to play outside corner. And then you have some up and down play from Isaiah Oliver, who you had pegged in as your starting nickel guy. He was up and down. We saw him playing in that preseason game against the Raiders, and it's like, well, why is he the only starter playing? Well, apparently he just wasn't starting. They had already kind of benched him in that nickel spot. So Lenore had to slide inside, had to play there, and then Ambry Thomas wasn't playing well. So then they put Diamador Lenore back outside. He's been a utility guy who has really played well no matter where they put him. And obviously in the slot, you'll give him a play here and there. He gave up a deep ball to Terry McLaurin in that game. But overall, I think he has played exceptionally well. And he's been a really key piece for the 49ers, holding the secondary together. You know, outside of him, you look at the other guys, a lot of it is helped with Travarius Ward. You know, guys have kind of been able to kind of get behind him a little bit, but it's been overshadowed by his ability to make plays and be consistent with that. So he's doing very well. And then Ambry Thomas, you talked about him, a little banged up, had to have surgery, I believe, on his hand. Hopefully that recovers fast because you want all hands on deck when the postseason starts.
If you haven't checked it out already, we recommend Locked On 49ers Pod. It's excellent. Eric Crocker, thanks for your time. It's been too long. We appreciate it. Hope to talk to you again soon. Thanks, Eric.
All right, anytime, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, how about those Philadelphia Eagles, huh? We'll take a timeout here when we come right back. And we are, speaking of the Eagles, we are expecting to hear from Drapes at some point here